Hey, what's up, everyone? How's it going? We are back, and well, there's a whole lot to go through on today's stream. First things first, we're going to be discussing all of the beta tuning that we received. Blizzard basically created like a whole big essay and sent it last night. And there's a lot of changes to go through. Pretty much every spec almost has received some of the other changes and potentially meta shifting changes as well, because they touched upon Resto Druid, they touched upon some of the tanks like Blood Death Knight, Brewmaster, Guardian Druid, Protection Warrior, even. So we're going to be looking at what's happening right now and how the changes are likely to affect things. Big changes for Mage as well. So stick around as we go through each one of them one by one. And yeah, feel free to type in chat how you feel about some of the changes, or if you've got something else, a different perspective on some of these changes. I would be happy to hear them. And yeah, let's get started right away. Perfect. So, first things first, let's look at Death Knight. So, Death Knight got a bunch of changes, mostly focused around Deathbringer for Frost, and then some changes for Rider of the Apocalypse as well. So if you go over it one by one, we've got Exterminate First Sight damage increased by 30% for Frost Deathbreaker. That's a buff. Reaper's Mark damage increased by 25%. That's another buff for Frost TK. Deathly Blows now increases the damage of Frost Strike by 15%, was 5. Swift and Painful now grants 8% increased strength when no enemies are struck by Soul Rupture, was 5%. So this is again another buff. If we look at something like, let me see if I can pull that up. But yeah, essentially this is like a straight up buff for Frost Deathbringer. Coming to Rider of the Apocalypse, auto attack damage of all horsemen reduced by 50%. So this is a slight nerf. If I look at the damage breakdown over here, um, the horseman was basically like your main mode of doing the damage in Rider of the Apocalypse. But this is just the auto attack damage, so it's not going to be like a huge impact on what we see. Then we've got Hungering Thirst now increases the damage of diseases, Frost Strike, Frost Pain, and Death Coil by 5%, and now also affects Necrotic Coil. So if you look at this one, Necrotic Coil is this one over here. So this is going to be getting buffed. So earlier this wasn't getting affected by Hungering Thirst. And this is now going to be affecting it. So not only has it increased the damage of diseases, but it's also added Necrotic Coil into one of the effects that it's going to impact, right? So this is a buff for Rider of the Apocalypse in general. So that means it's going to be affecting both Frost and Unholy. Coming to the next one, which is a Frost specific change. Frost of Souls now increases the damage of runic power abilities by 10% when you have 2 or more active horsemen, was 20%. This is a nerf to Rider Frost, essentially. But then, I believe what they're trying to do is bring Deathbringer up a bit and, sort of nerf. It's a very slight nerf, to be honest, for Rider of the Apocalypse Frost, but more than likely you're going to be playing Deathbringer Frost. Coming to Unholy. White Mane's Epidemic, now this is one of your horsemen. Damage increased by 150%. Trollbane's Ice Fury, damage increased by 100%. And Undeath damage increased by 50%. So all in all, this is like an overall buff to Unholy Rider of the Apocalypse. That's a good thing. I think Unholy, while on pre-patch, it was sort of breaking the meters, but on the beta, at the point where we have all access to our Apex talents and all of our hero talents, was a little bit in sort of underperforming essentially. It wasn't very bad. It wasn't like it was bottom of the tier or anything, but yeah, still a bit on the lower side. And I think this is definitely going to help it. Next up, we've also got Unholy Sandlane changes. Inevitable now increases the damage of diseases by up to 30%, was 20%. So again, your disease damage going up, that's great. And then Infliction of Sorrow now causes Vampiric Strike to extend the duration of plague by 3 seconds, was 2 seconds. So you've got more plague extension. So this is again a buff. Uh, so far, this has been basically buffs for Unholy DK. We've also got some changes to Blood, and that's really good news because Blood DK was one of the tanks that was underperforming so far, and I think it definitely deserves some additional buffs. So let's see. We've got Death Strike damage increased by 20%, Blood Boil damage increased by 15%, Heart Strike damage increased by 20%, Death and Decay increased by 25, Consumption 30, and Bone Shield armor increased by 20%. So this is more of a survivability buff, but still good. Blood Fortification stamina increased to 35 was 30. So your health pool has gone up by about 5%. And Apex Talent Dance of Midnight has a 100% chance to trigger. Again, these are all great changes. If we look at the blood breakdown, we've got Blood Boil doing most of your damage, like 21% almost in this Algathar Academy run. We've got Blood Plague, which is another one that is so Blood Boil. Blood Boil was the one that got buffed, and then you've got Dancing Rune Weapon, Exterminate. This is the Deathbringer tree, of course. And then you've got Reaper's Mark. You've got Heart Strike getting buffed, and you've got your Death and Decay getting buffed. So overall, this is like all positive changes for Blood DK. Now, is it going to become meta as a result? I don't think that these changes are going to push it into like a meta state or anything like that, because we also have other tank changes to go through. So I'll probably touch upon the meta part of it at that point in time. But at this point, Blood DK is now sort of matching up to the other tanks, right? Earlier, it was underperforming by quite a bit in terms of its damage. And now this is just kind of bringing them a little bit closer or probably at par with the kind of damage that other tanks are doing. Um, so I wouldn't say that this pushes Blood DK into the meta state, but yeah, changes are welcome nevertheless, right? Uh, and then we've got further changes to Frost. Obliterate damage has been increased by 15%, Frost Strike damage reduced by 10%, Frost Pain damage reduced by 10%. So essentially what they're doing is they are kind of redistributing the damage over here, and they're putting more damage into Obliterate while simultaneously reducing the damage to Frost Strike and Frostbane damage. And then Unholy gets like a flat aura buff of 8%. So this is on top of all of the changes we saw for Unholy before this. So safe to say Unholy is definitely in a much, much better spot right now compared to what it was before. So really happy to see that change happening. Coming to Demon Hunter then. So we're going to be looking at Alrachi Reaver. Now Alrachi impacts both Havoc as well as Vengeance. So Reaver's Glaive damage reduced by 10%, and Reaver's Mark now increases damage taken by 5% per stack was 6%. So this basically means that as Vengeance Demon Hunter, you're pretty much not going to be playing Alrachi. We weren't anyway. We were basically playing the Annihilator build, which is the new hero talent, which is shared between Devourer and Vengeance. But this further solidifies the fact that you'll be playing Annihilator for Vengeance as opposed to Alrachi. Coming to Void Scarred for Devourer. This is basically what they're saying here is we're taking some power out of Void Scarred's Metamorphosis window and shifting it to their non-meta effects. This is a good thing. I think I've touched upon this previously as well, where I've talked about how all of Devourer's damage is basically sitting within the Void meta, and outside of that, it barely does any damage. Which means that this was feeling pretty bad at lower level keys, because the mob switch is dying so quickly, you wouldn't get a chance to actually make full use of your Void meta. And that would end up looking like you doing tank damage on the meters, which didn't feel very good, to be very honest with you. So these kind of changes are definitely welcome. I think this gives it a more, how should I put it? It gives it better sustained damage, right? So it already had good burst damage and it was lacking in terms of sustained damage, but with these changes, it has better sustained damage now. Let's read them in detail. Flamebound has been updated. Hungering slash critical strike damage bonus increased to 125% was 50%. So this is a huge buff to Flamebound. So this is good. The damage bonus of meta-empowered versions of Voidblade, Hungering Slash, and Hunts reduced to 20% was 30%. So this is essentially what they were talking about. They're saying that, we're going to put more damage outside of Void meta and reduce the damage that sits within Void meta. Then we've got Monster Rising. It grants 15% increase intellect when outside of meta was 8%. So again, this will help increase your sustained damage because uh, you are getting a lot more intellect primary stat outside of your void meta. It was 8% before, so this is nearly like a 2x increase to the amount of intellect that you're getting from this. And that is great for our sustained damage. And then next we have Enduring Torment now increases the effectiveness of Mastery outside of meta by 20%. And this was 10%. So this has been doubled as well. And then we had some changes in as part of like a hot fix last week, which was, reap damage increased by 75%, consume damage increased by 30%, and generates one additional soul fragment. Shattered Souls now has a 4% chance to cause a damaging spell to generate a soul fragment was 8%. Entropy grants you a soul fragment every 12 seconds was 8 seconds. And Waste Not causes Void Ray to have a 200% increased chance of generating soul fragment. And then they fixed an issue. Yeah, that's like a sort of a voice change thing. But essentially, with all of these changes combined, I think you are going to be playing Void Scarred if for better sustained damage. They haven't addressed Annihilator, so I think that still is going to be something that I'd be looking forward to. I think that needs to be addressed as well. But to me, based on these changes, it kind of looks like you're going to be favoring Void Scar as opposed to Annihilator. You were already doing that in single target, but with the better sustained damage that we're seeing over here, I think you might be favoring Void Scar in M plus builds as well. But of course, we'll have to test this further to see if that's actually the case. Next up, then, we are going to have a look at Druid. So, Druid, we've got a bunch of changes for Restoration, Balance, and Guardian Druid. We're going to go over them one by one. They haven't really touched Feral as much. I mean, there are some general talent tree changes which will have an effect on Feral as well, but it's not you know moving the earth more than what it was going to move anyway, right? So let's look at it. Keeper of the Grove. For Balanced Druid, Spirit of the Thicket now increases Starfall damage by 12%, was 8%. So this is a positive change for Balance, definitely. And then we've got Potent Enchantment increases Incarnation's duration by 6 seconds, was 3 seconds. So again, this is essentially your Incarnation has been increased by, or rather almost the extension that it was getting from this talent has been doubled. So instead of getting a 3-second extension, you're now getting a 6-second extension. Next up, we've got general class changes. Matted Fur absorption increased by 100%. Matted Fur last 15 seconds was 8. Regrow direct healing reduced by 15%. So remember, this not only affects restoration, but this also affects all other druid specs, right? And Wild Growth healing increased by 25%. This is more so specific to restoration because as Balanced Feral or Guardian, you weren't really using Wild Growth. You were using Regrow to a certain extent to like off heal every now and then, especially as Guardian. So this is going to have an impact there as well. But again, this is primarily going to affect restoration. And I think it's almost fair. Restoration was overperforming, in my opinion. So it definitely needed to see some nerfs coming its way in order to kind of, bring it in line with the other healers. Although I would have preferred that they brought other healers up. But yeah, what they've done is they've basically nerfed Resto Druid. I think overall, bringing this down is also going to have an impact on the highest keys that we're able to clear by the end of the season. Because one of the reasons a lot of high keys were being pushed on beta was that Resto Druid was just able to out heal a lot of the damage, right? So now your tank needing to be really tanky, needing to have high survivability becomes even more important because you don't have the safety net from Restoration Druid that you had up until now. Moving on, let's look at Balance Druid. Starfire now deals 70% of primary target damage to nearby enemies, was 50%. Starfall damage increased by 10%, Star Surge damage increased by 5%, Sunseeker Mushroom and Wild Mushroom damage increased by 10%, Power of Goldrun damage increased by 5%, Denizen of the Dream reduced by 15%. So basically, what they're doing here, and that's what's mentioned in the dev notes, is that they're rolling back some of the bonuses to Denizen, move that damage into your own abilities instead. So what they've done is, your baseline damage has been buffed a bit, but the damage that you were getting specifically from Denizen of the Dream has been reduced. And I think these are good changes. I think it's good that you have more damage in your baseline as opposed to like one single node. So this is definitely better. Then we've also got Stellar Amplification, increases your periodic effect damage on affected targets by 16%, was 20%. So this is basically like a slight nerf to your dots essentially, which is good. I think having more damage in your direct hitting spells as a boomy definitely feels a little bit better for me personally. I know that there are some people who prefer having a lot of their damage sitting in their dots as well, because that allows you for some, like, it doesn't punish you as much if you've got your dots up, but have to move during a mechanic or something and therefore losing cast of certain spells. But definitely for me, I feel like having those having higher damage to your direct damaging spells definitely feels better. Moving on to Guardian. Now, just get some water before I talk about Guardian, because that's again a long list of changes. Perfect. So, talking about Guardian, armor granted from Iron Fur increased by 10%. This is a relatively minor change. I think like at least I didn't feel like that the armor you were getting from Iron Fur was lacking in any way. And a 10% increase is, relatively minor because you were hitting armor cap in I think 3 or 4 Iron Fur stacks anyway. So yeah, I mean this doesn't really do much for you. Uh, then we've got mangle damage increased by 30%. This is more impactful for something like Druid of the Claw, where you are much more reliant on Mangle for dealing damage. Not so much for Elun's Chosen. And I think if I can find that here. Yeah. So if you look at the damage breakdown over here, and this is, we are looking at. Uh, yeah. Yeah, here is what we have as the Druid of the Claw stuff. So you can see here Mangle was doing like almost 9%, 9 to 10% of your overall damage. So the fact that this is now getting buffed by 30%, that's pretty good. We've also got Lunar Beam damage increased by 30%, and that's what Elun's Chosen does quite a bit of damage through. So for Elun's Chosen, these changes are even better because for Elun's Chosen, you had almost 5.7, like 6% nearly, and 5.5% in Mangle and Lunar Beam, and both of these are getting buffed. Moonfire damage is getting increased by 30%. That's again great for Elun's Chosen. So overall, what they're doing is they're basically bringing Elun's Chosen more in line with its other hero talent, Druid of the Claw. At the moment, Druid of the Claw was doing like a good amount of damage, decent, I would say. And Elun's Chosen was the one that was underperforming a bit. And if I look at like, the top logs over here, so we've basically got um, Algathar 20, where we've got like an overall damage DPS of around 91k. And if we look at Elun's Chosen, this was around 80k, right? So it was 10k behind Druid of the Claw. And I think these changes are going to bring it more in line, if not probably a bit ahead, just a tiny bit ahead of what Druid of the Claw was doing. This is good. Uh, if we specifically look at Red Moon damage increase, I feel like this is going to be more of a single target damage buff. So Red Moon was basically the choice node that we had. So if we look at this one, and let me hop to Guardian over here. So we had, this was Red Moon, right? You would basically channel the power of Enraged Moon to deal damage to your target over 8 seconds, and casting Mangle extends its duration by 1 second and generates 8 rage. And this was on choice node with Twin Moonfire. So typically what you would do is you would take Twin Moonfire in um, Mythic Plus settings, and Red Moon was something that was being considered to be taken in raid fights, especially like the single target raid fights. Uh, but anywhere where you have any ads or any, sort of like council fights, you would still have taken Twin Moonfire. So this is specifically like a single target option, right? And they're buffing that, so that's definitely good to see. I still feel like Moonfire for Elun's Chosen will definitely be a better bet, even in single target, but we'll just have to see how those changes actually come about. All right, next up, we've got Innate Results now increases Frenzied Region's healing by up to 80%, was 120%. So what they've done is Frenzied Region healing has been nerfed a bit. But if you look at the next line, uh, which is like another nerf to the baseline Frenzied Region healing, it's now 32% of max health, was 40. But then what they've done over here in the third line is they've reduced the cooldown, therefore increasing the frequency with which you can cast this. So now your cooldown has been reduced to 26 seconds from 36 seconds. I think having more frequent regions is definitely better than less frequent and doing more healing. Guardian Druid was anyways pretty tanky in keys. There were also instances where you have Frenzied Region rolling and your healer's also healing you. So your Frenzied Region would end up doing a lot of overhealing. And then in the next damage event phase, maybe you're taking a lot of damage, maybe the healer is out of cooldown. So it kind of created certain instances where you felt like, oh, I wish I had Frenzied Region up. So reducing that cooldown is definitely a positive change in my opinion. Ursock's Fury now grants an absorb shield for 30% of the damage dealt by Thrash and Maul, was 40%. So this is again a tankiness nerf. I'm not quite sure how I feel about this, although it's like a 10% nerf. Uh, I don't think it'll change a lot, but it's a nerf nevertheless, right? And then we've got Moonless Night, increased to 40%, was 20%. So Moonless Night is this talent over here. Your direct damage melee abilities against enemies afflicted by Moonfire cause them to burn for an additional 40% arcane damage. So that's basically what they've changed. This used to be 20% before. So now essentially what you're going to be doing is that you're going to be doing 40% additional arcane damage from the Moonfire dot, essentially. And if we look at some of the logs, and this is again for Druid of the Claw, Moonless Night was doing like 5.6% over here. So this is going to go up a bit. And then we've got... Yeah, we've got Elun's Chosen here. Moonless Night was doing a lot more damage. So this is going to go up over here for Elun's Chosen as well. So all in all, these are essentially damage buffs to Guardian Druid. Did it need it? I would say yes, especially Elun's Chosen definitely needed some damage buffs. Druid of the Claw was okay, but it wasn't really as competitive as something like the Brewmaster damage or Prot Paladin damage. Prot Paladin damage is like, again, it's like off the charts, but these buffs are definitely going to help Guardian Druid. Now, let's look at Restoration Druid. The dev notes they read: the goal of these changes is to reduce Restoration Druids' power in dungeons while keeping them at a similar power level in raids. This is primarily accomplished through reducing effectiveness of their mastery and regrowth, while bringing up the effectiveness of wild growth and some raid-oriented talents. You're also doing some targeted buffs for some weaker, unpopular talents for restoration. So right off the bat, they've nerfed their mastery, right? This has gone down by 20%. Intensity increases regrowth's critical healing by 60%, was 75%. And this basically means that whenever you would do like a critical heal, whenever your regrowth would crit, it would do 75% increased healing, but now it's going to be 60% increased healing. That's a slight nerf to regrowth. Let me see if I can find that. Yeah. So as you can see over here, regrowth was doing like 20% of your healing, right? It was doing definitely a lot of healing, and this getting a nerf isn't all bad. I think it just brings it in line with the rest of the healers. And yeah, I mean, is Resto Druid going to be meta anymore? I don't know. We'll have to test and see. But I think it needed that nerf. I've touched upon this before. We've seen other healers like Test Priest, Holy Paladin getting nerfed back to back to back, but Resto Druid not being addressed at all, and that was increasing the gap between Resto Druid and the other healers. But with these nerfs, they're coming sort of a bit more in line with the rest of the healers, and therefore towards a better balance. And leave everything aside, I think one of the most important things that we need to see for Mythic Plus to do well is that we need to have a better healer balance. I wouldn't want a season where we've got 90% of the players playing Resto Druid. I think that would be really bad for Mythic Plus. Uh, Although, that said, a meta is always going to exist. But the question is, when you're looking at, you know, mid to high level keys, there should be at least some variety over there. For the highest of the high keys, yes, there'll be like one healer that'll be outperforming everyone else. And even if it's by like a 0.5% or like a 1%, people are going to play that just because you're pushing the highest level of keys. But for anything in between, let's say plus 10s to plus 18s, 19s, if you have a better healer balance, I think, in my opinion, that's great for the game. Next up, we've got Unstoppable Growth reduces wild growth's fall off by 30% per point, was 15%. So this is basically so I think it's better if we go and find the talent for this one. Yeah, restoration. Yeah. So this is what we're looking at, right? So unstoppable growth, wild growth healing falls off 30% less over time. Now, the way wild growth works is that you apply it as a hot on your players, and then over time, its healing sort of diminishes. So you've got like a big first heal, and then sort of subsequent ticks of wild growth, they keep reducing by a certain percentage, right? Now, what this has done is that it has reduced that fall off. So that means your subsequent ticks are going to do a lot more healing than they previously did. And again, this is more of a raid oriented buff, like they said. But, that said, uh, we like right now in Mythic Plus, we're not even like, if you look at this particular most popular build for Mythic Plus, you're not even taking these two talents over here. I'm not sure if this will motivate us to take that, especially on the back of regrowth nerfs. But yeah, definitely a good change for raids. And then you've got improved wild growth, increases the number of wild growth targets by 2, was 1. This is again the node above this. So this was earlier 1 additional target. This has now become 2 additional targets. So again, this is more like a raid oriented buff. This means that you will be able to cover more people with your wild growth than you previously could in raids, which is where it's most relevant, because in keys you anyways were like a 5-player group. Next up, we've got Regenesis increases healing done by Rejuve or Tranquility by up to 30% per point was 15%. So this is again a raid-oriented buff, right? You in raids you would typically cover everyone with Rejuves, and then you would pop your Tranquility as like your big healing cooldown. So once you had everyone hotted up, huge damage event comes in, you pop Tranquility, everyone stopped to full, right? And Regenesis was a talent which was basically buffing that. Earlier, this was buffing it by 15%. It's now going to buff it by 30%. The Resident Druid is definitely going to be much more sought after in raids than it was previously. Then we've got Embrace the Dream healing increased by 85%. Master Shapeshifter generates 20% more mana from Wrath, Starfire, and Star Surge. So, your mana recovery is going to get a little bit better. And then Nurturing Dormancy increases rejuve duration by up to 6 seconds, was 4 seconds. So this is again a buff to rejuve. It would make covering the rest of your raid with rejuves much more easier now that it's, going to be 6 seconds as opposed to 4 seconds, like the increase to rejuve. Overall, overall your rejuves are going to last much more longer. And yeah, I think that's definitely a good thing for Resto Druids and raids. That said, looking at all of these changes, I don't think that Restoration Druid is now in a position where it is unplayable in keys or anything like that. I think it still has a lot of potential to be meta, and we'll see exactly why as we move towards further changes. Let me just close a few of these tabs. Perfect. Coming to Evoker. Now, unfortunately, our lizard boys have got another nerf. Consume Flame was already nerfed in one of the previous tuning notes, and they're basically tuning it further. Consume Flame now consumes 4 seconds of Fire Breath from Pyre was 8 seconds, and 1 second of Fire Breath from Disintegrate damage was 1.5 seconds. This was what was giving you sort of like that prior profile where it was every time you would cast Consume Flame, the new one, whatever Fire Breath and Disintegrate dot that you had on the target, Consume Flame would essentially soak up 8 seconds worth of damage from your uh, Fire Breath, and then 1 second of Fire Breath from Disintegrate, and it would kind of like add that into this Consume Flame and deal that as Consume Flame damage, right? So it was basically additional damage on top. And then we've got Consume Flame damage is now dealt at 115%, was 125%. So effectively, both of these changes, to keep it really simple, have nerfed this bit over here, right? This is an overall nerf to Devastation Evoker. Not quite happy with it. Will this mean that Scale Commander sees a little bit more play? I'm not sure. We'll have to test it out a bit. But from the looks of it, Scale Commander definitely looks to be a bit more competitive given the Flame Shaper nerfs that we are seeing. Again, I would have preferred them buffing up Scale Commander a bit more, but this is what we have. That's all that we can do for now. Then we've got Devastation. Disintegrate damage increased by 10%. I guess they were throwing us a bone. I don't know. Because if I look at this damage profile again, Disintegrate barely does like 2.8% of all of our damage. You buff this by 10%. This is like what I mean. At an overall level, it doesn't really make much of a difference, right? Like the nerfs to Pyre Consume Flame, with like the Consume Flame changes essentially, is much bigger, more impactful than this little meaningless buff over here. Yeah, I'm not even sure what that means. All right, next up we've got Hunter. Now, BM is continuing to overperform across all content, so we are bringing down their baseline power and apex talent damage and making smaller adjustments to individual hero talents. Marksmanship is getting a small bump in AoE paired with a few buffs to underperforming spells like Kill Shot and Volley. And for survival, we are buffing up Wildfire Bomb's single target damage bonus to ensure it isn't being forgotten about in Pack Leader's single target rotation, and tamping down Sentinel since it's already overperforming and poised to gain a significant boost from Wildfire Bomb single target damage bonus. Wow, that was a mouthful. Uh, let me just get some water again, and then we go through the Hunter essay. Like I said, I mean, bunch of changes made by Blizzard. All right, let's start with Dark Ranger. Shadow Thrash now deals shadow damage, but its damage has been reduced by 30%. So that's fine because shadow damage, anyways, just ignores armor. So what they've done is they've changed the damage type to shadow and they've reduced the damage it does by 30%. I think that's fair. Blighted Quiver now increases Beast Cleave and Kill Cleave effectiveness by 5%, was 10%, so this is a nerf to BM. And then we've got Pact of the Hollow now increases Blighted Arrow damage by 25%. So this is actually a pretty good, pretty strong buff for marksmanship, especially in like single target. Next, we've got pack leader changes. BM, Boar AoE increased by 200%. Pack mentality grants 4 seconds of CDR was 6 and increases skill commands damage by 25 was 50. This is a nerf to pack leader BM. And then for survival, we've got the bleed bonus increased to 35 from 20. And again, similarly, Boar AoE increased by 200%. And if you look at Sentinel Survival, and this was the one which most people were playing on beta at the moment, and it was doing like crazy amounts of damage, right? Like S plus tier of damage almost. Uh, Sentinel's mark has been updated. Wildfire Bomb damage bonus reduced to 40%, was 80%. Can't Miss, Won't Miss has been updated. Tip of the Spear damage bonus reduced to 4%, was 10%. Big nerf over there. And Moon's Blessing now grants 4 seconds of Wildfire Bomb CDR, was 6 seconds. So they're basically nerfing Sentinel, and this is in line with what they've said before that, because Sentinel is overperforming, we're going to nerf that, and we're going to be buffing Pack Leader, especially like the single target aspect of it. So let's see what we've got. DM, all damage dealt by the hunter and their pets reduced by 12%. Huge nerf. Like, uh, yeah, like this on top of everything else that we've seen so far, BM is going to be sitting and crying in a corner, I feel. Apex Talon, Nature's Ally, now increases the damage of Cobra Shot and Barb Shot by 15%, was 30%. Uh, yeah, I mean, another nerf for BM. What else can I say? Then we've got MM buffs. Volley damage increased. Trick shots effectiveness increased to 75, was 65. Aspect of the Hydra effectiveness increased to 70, was 60. Kill shot damage increased by 25%, does not affect Black Arrow. And headshot now increases damage per stack by 3%, was 2%. These are basically huge buffs to marksmanship. This combined with what we saw within Dark Ranger, I think definitely puts marksmanship in a better spot. Um, is it going to be able to compete with survival? I I kind of still feel like survival has two things working in its favor. A, it feels really great to play, and it does a lot of damage. Uh, Even with the changes to with the changes to survival in Sentinel, you still have pack leader, which is doing pretty good, and on top of that, you're getting some primary target buffs to Wildfire Bomb, and you've got this. Basically, what this means is that you're going to have a better prior profile as survival. You're probably going to be switching to pack leader, or it might be a situation where you're sort of playing sentinel in certain dungeons and pack leader in some other dungeons, depending on the type of mobs. Like if you've got a lot of prior mobs in one dungeon, you might want to go with pack leader, in my opinion. And if you've got a lot of, just general more of AoE and less of prior damage required, you might still play Sentinel, but yeah, we'll just have to test that and find out. But right now, essentially what they've done is kept Pack Leader and Sentinel both fairly competitive for survival. And even if there's going to be like some differences, it's going to be fairly minor from what I can read. Moving on, then we've got mage changes. Now, Mage has been doing pretty well on beta so far. I think Arcane Mage had insane single target damage. Frost Mage had pretty good AoE damage, and a couple of things that the community had been talking about was Arcane needing some AoE buffs, Frost needing some single target buffs, and Fire just needed Fire just needed a lot of changes. Like right now, Fire is not in the healthiest of states. But let's start off right. For Frost Fire Fire, Heat Sink now increases Fire Blast damage by 15%, was 30%. The Fire Blast damage is getting nerfed. Dual Casting Adept now increases Pyro damage by 15%, was 10%. So your Pyro damage is getting buffed over here essentially. And then you've got Frost. And this is again Frost Fire Frost. So Frost Fire Bolt damage reduced by 20%. Isothermic Core's Meteor now shatters one freezing stack, was 2. This is effectively a damage nerf. Duality is Pyroblast damage by 100%. So Duality is basically where you're able to kind of, every time you cast a Glacial Spike, you also fire a Pyroblast along with that. So the Pyroblast component of that has been buffed. Molten Chill Ignite's effectiveness increased to 30%, was 15%. So these are essentially single target buffs for Frost, Frostfire. Let's also look at Arcane Spellslinger. Control Instincts has been updated. Cleave percentage increased to 60%, was 40%. Arcane Splinter damage increased by 80%. Signature Spell now increases Arcane Pulse and Arcane Blast damage by 25, was 15. Polish Focus now increases Arcane Barrage damage by 25, was 15. So these changes over here are basically to bring Spellslinger, it seems, Spellslinger in line with Sun Fury. Sun Fury was the one that everyone was preferring to play because it was doing a lot of damage, especially in single target, and its prio was amazing. So if you wanted to time a key faster, you wanted to bring an Arcane Mage with you because they would just melt down the prio mobs. So yeah, they're basically trying to bring Spellslinger more in line with Sun Fury with this one. Frost. Control Instinct's damage effectiveness increased to 60%, was 40%. So again, slight buff to Frost Mages. Moving to Sun Fury. Prepare yourselves. This is a long, long, long list of changes for Mage. So, Arcane Phoenix, area spell damage increased by 50%. Arcane Soul duration reduced to 4 seconds, was 6 seconds. So this, in my opinion, is a pretty significant nerf to Arcane Soul. What you were doing right now, what you were doing right now in your rotation, especially like in the Sun Fury build, was you would start off by casting a big Arcane Surge, and you would build up to 25 stacks of Arcane Salvo, and then you would cast Touch of the Magi into Arcane Barrage, and then try to get back up on those stacks of Arcane Salvo, right? In between, you would weave Arcane Orb and Arcane Blast to kind of maintain your Arcane charges at 4. But the primary gameplay hook was around your Arcane Salvo. And what would happen is that in Sun Fury, as soon as your Arcane Surge would end, you would get Arcane Soul, which would allow you to basically cast Arcane Barrages back to back, and it would not consume any salvo stacks. Instead, it would generate 5 salvo stacks, and this would last for 6 seconds. So this lasting for 6 seconds means that you could actually build up a lot of damage in your Touch of the Magi window, and it was great for, great for that prio damage burst especially. So what they've done is they've reduced it to 4 seconds. This means fewer casts of Arcane Barrage in that soul window, which means that directly your damage has been nerfed, right? Then we've got Ashes of Inspiration, haste reduced to 15%, was 20%, and duration reduced to 6%, was 10 seconds. 6 seconds was 10 seconds. This is again a nerf. Arcane Mage was scales really well with haste. So any of these talents which kind of granted you that extra haste, especially at the start of an expansion, would really hurt Arcane Mage because it affects your spell cast times as well for stuff like Arcane Blast, right? So having that haste reduced is going to hurt it a bit. Sun Fury Execution now grants Arcane Barrage, 5% increased damage during Touch of the Magi, was 10%. So again, during Touch of the Magi, that's the reason you wanted to, you were benefiting so much from Arcane Soul, is because you had 10% increased damage. And so each time you were in that Touch of the Magi and Arcane Soul window, you wanted to prioritize Arcane Barrage at all times. So this is like a double nerf, right? Not only is the Arcane Barrage damage reduced in that touch window, but your Arcane Soul window is also reduced. So yeah, your burst is not going to be as great as it used to. And Glorious Incandescence now summons a meteor for every 6 stacks of Arcane Salvo consumed was 5. This is again, you're getting fewer casts of Meteor every time Arcane Salvo was consumed. So earlier, you would basically drop a Meteor for every 5 stacks of Arcane Salvo that was consumed. So if you had 25, it would go down to essentially 5 Meteor casts. Now in Spellslinger, you were only able to stack Arcane Salvo to 20. So you were only getting 4. This change over here brings Sun Fury more in line with Arcane, because with 6 stacks, you are now only able to get 4 even if you're stacking to 25, right? So only 4 casts of Meteor. This sort of brings it in line with Spellslinger. And then next up, we've got Fire Mage changes. Spellfire's Sphere chance to trigger increased to 25 was 20. Burden of Power now increases Flame Strike and Pyroblast damage by 5%, was 8%, so this is a slight nerf. Hypothermia duration reduced to 4 seconds was 6 seconds. Ashes of Inspiration haste reduced to 15% was 20. And duration reduced to 6 seconds was 10. So Fire is likely not gonna like playing with Sun Fury anymore. They might be moving towards Frostfire, but let's see. Alright, back to Arcane. Dev notes. We're looking to reduce Sun Fury's single target damage through Hero Talent Tree as well as Arcane's baseline power. Spellslinger will be getting some buffs to compensate for the baseline ability reductions. Arcane's AoE damage is further behind, and we'll be making some targeted adjustments. So whatever we saw so far was kind of in line with the dev notes over here, but there's more changes, so let's read through them. Arcane Barrage damage reduced by 20%, missiles reduced by 20%, Arcane Blast reduced by 20%, Explosion reduced by 20%. These are all pretty big nerfs in single target. Yeah, I mean, these were the... Let me see if I can find that over here. I think I had Arcane Mage open somewhere. Yeah. So as you can see, your top 4 sources of damage, right? Arcane Barrage, Arcane Missiles, Meteorite, Touch of the Magi, Touch of the Archmage. All of these getting nerfed either through Sun Fury or through the baseline, right? What they've done instead is they've increased Arcane Orb damage. Arcane Pulse damage has been increased. So this was the one that was replacing Arcane Explosion, right? Because Arcane Explosion required you to be in melee. Blizzard, what they did for Midnight is they gave us Arcane Pulse, which basically allows you to sort of cast same from range instead. So they've increased that. Nobody was playing it so far. I don't think that a 10% buff is going to make people play that, but let's see. Arcane Surge damage increased by 25%. So Arcane Surge is basically what you would cast as your opener, right? So you would go Arcane Surge, do a ton of damage based on the amount of mana that you've consumed. So that's why you would always open with it, so that you're consuming all of your mana for maximum damage. And this is being buffed. I think that's good, especially because that is your opener in Mythic Plus. This will be like a lot of front-loaded damage. So I think that's good. And it used to kind of splash damage in AoE. So, it's an AoE buff, basically. But it's also a slight single target buff, right? Arcane Cleave effectiveness increased to 60%, was 50%. If I go here, and this is Arcane Cleave. So it basically, earlier what it was doing was it was hitting it for 50%. Now it's going to be hitting secondary targets for 60% of the damage, which means that more splash damage from Arcane Barrage. So that's good. Then we've got Resonance, now increases Arcane Barrage's damage by 8% for each target, was 5%. And again, this is this bit over here, where Arcane Barrage deals 5% increased damage per target it hits beyond the first, right? So what they've done is, with the nerfs to Arcane Barrage, they've sort of reduced the prior damage, and increase the AoE damage. I think that's good. Arcane Mage was definitely lacking a bit in AoE damage, especially when you were doing like bigger pulls. This is definitely gonna help it, but I'm not sure if these changes are enough to compensate for these changes that we've seen here. Because remember, like Arcane Barrage damage reduced by 20%, Resonance basically functions off of Arcane Barrage, right? And make taking that from 5 to 8, I don't think it's a really great AoE damage buff when your baseline damage for Arcane Barrage itself has been reduced. Next up, we've got Touch of the Archmage has been updated. Damage taken during Touch of the Magi reduced to 15% from 20%. So it stores, your touch basically stores lesser damage during its window. And the primary target bonus, earlier it would deal all of it, 100% of it to your primary target. Now it's just going to deal 75% of it. So yeah. All in all, single target nerfs, as they mentioned, and small AoE buffs. I don't think it is very I don't think that it's gonna be a big enough AoE buff to offset the amount that has been lost in uh single target. It really impacts our damage profile because we were really good at prior damage before this, and now we are not as good. At least we still have prior damage, but not as good as it was. Next up, we've got fire. Now, before we get into the fire changes, I think it's really important to remember that earlier as Frostfire Fire, Pyroblast was doing very little damage to the point that it was almost not worth pressing. And these changes should make it. Something's gone wrong with my Zoom. There you go. So you weren't basically pressing Pyroblast at all. Like it wasn't worth pressing Pyroblast. So what they're doing is we're taking some damage out of Fire Blast and Fireball and moving it into Pyroblast to ensure your hot streaks are hitting as hard as they should. This, in my opinion, definitely addresses the problem that we've been having as Fire Mage, right? What they've also done is they've improved the effectiveness of Mastery Ignite, and Pyroblast damage has been increased, Fire Blast damage reduced, and Fireball damage reduced as well. So I think these are all positive changes. Definitely makes it feel better. We'll have to test it out to see whether it is actually, you know, doing damage in the way we actually want it to. But these are definitely changes in the right direction. Whether the amount is good or bad, that only testing can tell. Next up, we've got Frost. We're looking to reduce Frost's area damage while increasing the single target damage. This is good. Like I mentioned before, Frost needed single target buffs and it needed AoE nerfs. So this is exactly on point. All damage dealt increased by 5%. So that's like a baseline aura buff. Shatter, primary target damage increased by 40%. Great. Flurry damage reduced by 20%. Glacial Assault chance to trigger reduced to 12% was 25. Splitting Ice now causes Flurry and Frostbolt to strike an additional target at 80% effectiveness was 100%. Frozen Orb damage reduced by 20%, and Comet Storm now shatters 1 freezing per stack per missile was 2. So overall, your AoE has gone down, but keep in mind Frost was overperforming in AoE and your single target has gone up. So that's definitely good. In single target, Frost was quite behind Arcane. Now with the fact that Arcane is being brought down in single target and its AoE is being buffed, and Frost has the opposite treatment where single target is being buffed and AoE is being nerfed, I think these two specs are much closer to each other than they were initially. So these are all good changes. Fire is still going to be TBC. I think that Fire Mage is still fairly behind Arcane and Frost. So I think it still needs more changes when it comes to Fire Mages. Next up, we've got Monk. Now, Brewmaster Monk had been playing with Shadowpan. That was a preferred hero talent choice. What they're doing here is they're basically trying to buff Master of Harmony. And what they're doing is Meditative Focus now increases blackout combos increase to Tiger Palm by an additional 100%, was 50%, and increases Press the Advantage's nature damage by an additional 100%, was 50%. Damage buffs to Master of Harmony. Then Way of a Thousand Strikes increases vitality stored by 60%, was 30%, and Path of Resurgence increases vitality stored by 50%, was 25%. So vitality was sort of like the main mechanic of Master of Harmony, right? So you would sort of, let me see if I can actually open it up for you. Let's go to Monk, Brewmaster. Uh, da, da, da. Let's actually go here. And whoops, let's change it to Master of Harmony. Yeah. So basically, the way it functioned was you would store vitality from 15% of your damage dealt and 7% of your effective healing. For 10 seconds after casting Celestial Brew, your spells and abilities draw upon the stored vitality to deal 40% additional damage over 8 seconds. So it was effectively kind of like a mechanic where the moment you would get into a fight, you would start storing up all of your whatever damage you were dealing and any healing that you were doing into something called vitality. Think of it as like a little can that you were storing all of this damage in. And then every time you would cast Celestial Brew, you would basically open up this can and it would apply a dot in terms of like this vitality would basically become like a dot. It would deal some upfront damage and the rest of it as a dot over 8 seconds. And the other part, the capstone for this was Coalescence. When Aspect of Harmony deals damage, it has a chance to spread to a nearby enemy. When you directly attack an affected target, it has a chance to intensify, withdrawing additional vitality to increase its effect by up to 20%. Cake Smash no longer contributes vitality, instead drawing on available vitality to increase damage done by up to 100%. Vitality stored by other abilities is increased by 50%. This little talent over here was essentially increasing your Cake Smash damage, and it was also simultaneously because it wasn't Cake Smash wasn't contributing to the vitality anymore. It had increased the vitality being received from other spells, right? So overall, vitality was basically just a way for you to store some of this damage and then redistribute it each time you would kind of cast your Celestial Brew. And they're essentially buffing that, right? So now you're able to store much more vitality, and that's basically what we're looking at here. Aspect of Harmony now generates vitality based on 25% of damage and 12% of effective healing. So this was the one that we read on top over here, right? The main one. So what this is going to do is that you're going to cap on vitality much quicker, which means that you're going to be pressing, you're going to be releasing more damage whenever you press Celestial Brew. I think this is good. The previous version would sometimes lead to a situation where you're not full on vitality, so you kind of don't want to press Celestial Brew, which is sort of your way to mitigate damage, right? And you wouldn't want to sort of hold it off a bit. But the fact that you're going to be capping on vitality much more quicker allows you to sort of press Celestial Brew much more leniently. You can press it when you want, when you need. And of course, this also increases the damage that Master of Harmony does because of all the other changes that we read. Then next up, we've got some general changes to Brewmaster. So we've got Cake Smash damage increased by 40%, Tiger Palm damage increased by 20%, Blackout Kick damage increased by 20%, Spinning Crane Kick damage increased by 20%. So again, let me see if I can find this actually over here. I had opened it. Yeah, here we have it. So this is basically a brew fight. Cake Smash does like 20% of all of your damage, right? I think buff to Cake Smash is great. Blackout Kick also going up is great. You've got Tiger Palm. Oops. Tiger Palm Not doing a lot of damage, so a buff is appreciated, but it's not really going to change a lot for you. Gotta fix my camera again. Yeah. So coming back to this, uh, spinning crane kick. Yeah, this was the one I wanted to address. So spinning crane kick is doing 0.05% of your damage. Like, this is a joke. Buffing it by 20%, it's not going to do a lot for it, right? I agree that we weren't pressing spinning crane kick because A, it wasn't doing a lot of damage to begin with, and that's why on the logs it looks a little bit lower. But then you need to understand that we weren't pressing it for a reason, right? Because it was barely doing any damage. Like, your Tiger Palm was out damaging spinning crane kick even in AoE scenarios. So I don't think the 20% damage is enough, but I wouldn't be one to say no to it. Bring on the buffs, however small they may be. Uh, Mistweaver changes, these are effectively a buff to Mistweaver. So they've been buffed a little bit. And moving on, we've got Paladin. So for Paladin, they've basically buffed Herald of the Sun. And for protection, Templar has been nerfed. Doesn't make a whole lot of difference because as protection, you were anyways playing Lightsmith. So doesn't really make a lot of difference for protection Paladin in terms of the damage. What is more important is, and we're going to get to that later. For Retribution, Hammer of Light primary target damage increased by 30%, Undisputed Ruling now lasts for 10 seconds was 8, and Seal of the Templar increases damage of Templar's verdict by 25% was 15%. So these are actually single target buffs to Retribution Paladin in the Templar hero tree. So that's good, right? Overall, both hero trees, Retribution has seen buffs. That's pretty good. Uh, this is a slight nerf, yes, but that's fine, I think. Uh, the holy changes, this is basically what we saw last week, right? They are basically including them for posterity as they've written over here, but it's pretty much the same as last week. I have a video on this one, so you can feel free to go check out my YouTube channel and have a look at the video over there. Moving to protection changes. Glory of the Vanguard now increases Shield of the Righteous damage to its initial target by 50%, was 20%, and armor granted by Shield of the Righteous reduced by 15%. This is a slight survivability nerf. Again, this is only going to impact the highest of high keys. I think baseline armor or protection paladin is pretty decent. But of course, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that this is not enough for lower keys as well, right? I think the amount of armor that you were previously getting from Shield of the Righteous, even at lower keys, although it wasn't something that would, one shot you or anything, it still kind of felt nice to have that little bit of extra cushion. Us losing 15% of that cushion definitely feels a bit bad, I'm not gonna lie. And yeah, I mean, uh, Prot Paladin Prot Paladin looking a little less likely to be the meta tank, but we still have like a month and a half worth of beta changes to go. So, I wouldn't bet on anything right now. And then finally, we've got priest changes. Halo damage increased by 50% for Archon Shadow. Discipline Priest. Penance's first bolt was earlier increased by 200. Now it's going to be increased by 125%. This is a slight nerf. And Prophet's Insights increases atonement healing by 15% was 20%. So this is a nerf to Discipline Oracle, Sag. But on the other hand, Collapsing Void damage and Entropic Rift damage were both increased by 33 and 60% respectively for Discipline Void Weaver. Discipline Void Weaver was actually lagging behind, and this is their effort to sort of bring it more in line with Oracle. So they've kind of taken Oracle down a peg and pushed Void Weaver up a bit so that they're more in line with each other. But then again, I don't think by any means Discipline Oracle was outperforming or anything. So I'm not sure if these nerfs were called for. I would have much preferred buffing up Void Weaver Discipline a bit more. Next up, we've got Shadow Void Weaver. Quicken Pulse now causes Shadow Word Pain and Entropic Rift to deal 15% damage, 15% more often was 25. So the frequency has gone down, like the pulsing damage from your Entropic Rift and Shadow Word Pain, that's gone down. But at the same time, let's probably look at Shadow and finish that off. Shadow has had all damage reduced by 15%. Huge nerf. To compensate, they've got Mind Blast damage by 40%, and this also applies to Void Blast. If I can just find Shadow over here. Yeah. So you've got... Where did Mind Blast go? Yeah, Mind Blast is over here. It was doing like 3.7%. They're buffing this up by 40%. So this is going to be like... This is going to be doing a little bit better damage, about 1.2% more damage overall. And then Shadow Word Pain damage increased by 25%. Again, Shadow Word Pain was doing like 13.4% damage. With this buff, it's probably going to be doing something like 2.5%-ish more damage. So that's a good buff for sure. But then again, did it? Yeah, I think it's good that Shadow Word Pain has gone up. Vampiric Touch damage increased by 100%. Now this is interesting. If I look at Vampiric Touch, it's doing like 4.2% of your damage. And the thing with Vampiric Touch is that it also heals you for 30% of the damage dealt, right? If I just go to healing over here, and if I look at Vampiric Touch, it was doing 4.1% of your healing to yourself. So this buff is actually going to be helping not just your overall damage, but also your survivability. I think this is like a very, very positive change for Shadow Priest. Next up, we've got Psychic Link. Now transfers 60% of the damage dealt was 45%. They're back at making changes to Psychic Link. This has been played around so much. It has gone all the way from 25% at some point in like Dragonflight, then it went to 40, then it went to 45, it went to 30, it went to 60, it went to 55 again, and like a whole bunch of changes. I feel like Psychic Link is one of those abilities which Blizzard is not quite sure exactly how to tune. So, I mean, it's a good tuning knob that they have. At least they're able to sort of, play around with AoE damage independent of affecting their single target damage. But yeah, it's a good change. Shadow Priest needed some AoE buffs. If I go over here and just go back to damage, Psychic Link was like our main way of dealing all damage, right? So this was doing like 18% of our damage. Buff, like increasing the transfer by another 15%, definitely going to help a lot. So good changes. Spectral Horrors now causes shadowy apparitions to deal 50% increased damage to targets afflicted by Shadow Word Madness, was 100%. So what they've done is they've increased the transfer and they have reduced the shadowy apparition damage. So reduce the baseline damage of shadowy apparitions, but increase the amount of transfer that happens through Psychic Link. So that's great. Yeah, I'm overall happy about Shadow Priest changes. Coming back to the healing specs of Priest, Shadow Mend healing increased by 19%, Shadow Word Death damage increased by 25%, Shadow Word Death deals 250% increased damage, and execute range for Discipline was 150. So this is going to affect your healing as well, but especially these last two, these are primarily like execute phase stuff, which is going to be helpful. It's going to it will make it more sought after in range, in raids, sorry, not range, because the toughest phase of any raid boss is towards the end of the fight. That's when you're about to hit the enrage timers. That's when you have typically one of the tougher phases. A lot of your healer cooldowns are gone, and like if you are sitting in that execute phase pumping out more heals, that just makes Discipline Priest that much more sought after in raid progression as opposed to any other healer. Is there enough to make it so that you want to stack Discipline Priest? I don't know. I think it's too soon to tell, but definitely makes it more likely to stack Discipline Priests in raids. And then we've got Holy, all healing done increased by 8%. I think this is great. Holy Priest was lagging behind significantly, whether it was in Mythic Plus or whether it was in raids. Their HPS just wasn't there, it wasn't up to the mark. I think they really deserve this 8% healing buff. All right, we have gone all the way to Priest. We still have a lot more to go. Safe to say, Blizzard has been super busy. All right, next up, we've got some rogue changes. This is a lot of changes. Uh, Subtlety. Momentum of Despair effect now increases Shuriken Storm and Black Powder crit damage by 30% was 20. AoE buff. Follow the Blood now increases Shuriken Storm and Black Powder damage by 15% was 10%. Mass Casualty now deals 75% of Deathstalker's mark was 60%. Overall, Deathstalker for sub getting a buff. I think we were favoring Trickster. I'm not sort of I'm not a subtlety main or anything, but yeah, these are good buffs to Deathstalker. Fatebound. Ravenholt's Melt increases damage bonus by 12% was 15%. Lucky Coin duration reduced to 12 seconds was 15 seconds. So this is basically a nerf to Fatebound. Next up, we've got Assassination. All damage increased by 3%, so basically an aura buff. Melee damage increased by 10%. Physical damage dealt by implacable strikes increased by 50%. Doomblade bleed damage increases 25% or mutilate damage was 20. Systemic failure increases the damage dealt by mutilate and ambush to targets with corrode by 30% was 20%. So overall, pretty sizable buffs to assassination. They were falling behind a bit compared to outlaw and subtlety. This kind of brings them up a bit, especially combined with some of the nerfs that we saw for subtlety. So yeah, good to see. Next up, we've got Outlaw. They reverted the 15% damage increase they had done previously. And the dev note on this says that Outlaw's performance on the beta had been hampered by a significant bug. Now that it's fixed, this damage bonus was not needed to keep them competitive. We're also adjusting Blade Flurry to keep AoE damage as intended in light of these changes. Essentially, they fixed the bug that was causing Outlaw to underperform previously. Now, in the meanwhile, they had basically given them a 15% aura buff because they hadn't fixed that bug yet. Now that they have fixed it, they're reverting the aura buff and they're kind of like getting back to individually tuning abilities. So what they've done is melee damage reduced by 10%. Let me see if I can actually find an outlaw rogue. Yeah. So your melee was doing like 8% of your damage. So this going down by 10%, like it's going to be a 1% decrease. That's all right. What's more important is Blade Flurry causes your abilities to strike nearby enemies for 30% of damage dealt was 25%. So this has gone up by 5%. So if we go back to this one, oops, this is Asa. Yeah. So Blade Flurry was doing like almost 45% of your damage. So this going up by 5%, or rather doing 5% more damage from your other abilities is definitely a sizable buff. But all in all, I think it should perform pretty much the same as it was doing so far on beta. I wouldn't worry too much about it. And here's a big one. Subtlety damage reduced by 8%. Now, Subtlety was one of those specs that was doing really well in Mythic Plus. It was doing really well in raids as well. And this 8% damage nerf is going to affect its performance across. Is Asa going to be the go-to spec? Not quite sure. We'll of course have to test it. But from the looks of it, Asa and Sub are definitely much closer to each other than they were before. And yeah, Outlaw pretty much stays where it was, right? I think this was an effort to bring all three rogue specs in line with each other. But to be fair, the three rogue specs where they sit now after all these changes is still going to be middle of the pack. It's not like it's doing some really bonkers damage or anything like that. And keep in mind that rogues don't even bring a very good raid buff. Like they have atrophic poison, which reduces the damage you take. But from a Mythic Plus perspective, you ideally want something that increases damage, and uh, you're always going to be uh, not chosen when being compared to specs like or classes like Druid, Shaman, uh, even Warrior. In fact, so yeah, I don't think this is very good. Next up, we've got Ellie Shaman. All damage reduced by 5%, Lightning Bolt damage reduced by 10%. I think Ellie was doing pretty good in raid, but in keys it was okay. It was doing well, but I think all damage reduced by 5% might have been a bit of an overkill. Uh, no changes to enhancement, which means that you'll likely be playing enhancement in keys, probably even in raids, but we'll have to test more to see that. All right, we are down to the Ws, the last two classes, Warlock and Warrior. So, next up, we've got Diabolist. Infernal Bolt damage increased by 150%. Ruination damage increased by 50%. Uh, Diabolist was something that Destro was playing. I think the other specs were preferring their alternative hero talents. This is more of a Destro buff than anything else. Of course, it buffs the other ones as well, but then not as much as it benefits Destro. Soul Harvester. Shared Vessel now increases mastery by 2%, was 4%, so this is a nerf. Manifest Demonic Souls, Soul Swipe, damage reduced by 30%. Some of these words are real tongue twisters, huh? Soul Anathema damage reduced by 40%. So it's basically a nerf to Soul Harvester. And then Demonic Soul damage reduced by 3%. Yeah, I mean, it's a nerf to. Let me just see if I can find that. Mm, yeah. So if you look at Affliction and if you look at Demonology, both Demonology and Affliction over here, we're basically playing Soul Harvester. This nerf basically affects both of them. Now, in terms of damage, Demonology was overperforming. It was doing crazy levels of damage. So I think the nerf is definitely called for when it comes to Demonology specifically. But I'm not sure if it was called for Affliction. I think Affliction was doing okay. I wouldn't say it was overperforming, but it's okay. Let's read for Affliction then. Apex Talent Shadow of Nathreza now summons a Desperate Soul 100% more often. It's fine. Desperate Soul Wrath of Nathreza damage reduced by 50%. So what this change does is you get a Desperate Soul much more quicker, but the damage it does has been reduced by 50%. So essentially, faster procs, but overall the same amount of damage, right? And then we've got Dark Harvest damage reduced by 30%. Overall, yeah, nerfs for Affliction and Demo. Destro, on the other hand, now Destro mains are going to be happy because Incinerate damage increased by 50%, Inflagrate increased by 40%, Chaos Pole increased by 10%, Summon Overfiend increased by 50%, Soulfire by 40%. The Destro players are going to be super happy with these changes. These are primarily aimed towards your single target damage. That's good, and I think they definitely deserved it. Coming to the Warrior then, we've got them addressing hero talents first. So Colossus Arms, Practice Strikes damage bonus increased to 20%, was 15. Arterial Bleed damage bonus reduced to 3%, was 5. So if I go over here, and let me see if I can find that. Yeah. So Arterial Bleed was this one. No, sorry. Where did it go? Mm. Yeah, there we go. Why is it not changing? Let me reload this one. Okay. Colossal Might, this is Arterial Bleed. Colossal Might increases the damage of your rend and deep wounds by 3% per stack. But typically, we weren't playing with Arterial Bleed. What we were playing with was instead one against many. Now, so again, I'm not sure. This is not going to have an impact at all, right? Similar changes for protection, practice strikes, damage, bonus going down. Let me see if I can find that. Yeah, this was practice strike. Mortal cleave and slam and cleave damage increased by 15%. So yeah, this is a slight buff to protection, but a slight nerf to a slight buff to arms as well. Coming to the big one, Mountain Thin Fury. Now, Mountain Thin Fury got big nerfs. Thunderblast damage reduced by 30%. If I can find it over here. So, Thunderblast is basically where you would, like, this was doing pretty much all of your damage in AoE, like 30% almost. And this getting nerfed by 30% is pretty much like a 9% overall damage nerf. On top of that, they increased lightning strike damage by 100%, but then lightning strike is like what, all the way down here. So yeah, this is overall just a big nerf to Fury. Sad to see, but yeah, unfortunate. We've then got Protection Warrior. Ground current damage increased by 150, lightning strike damage by 50%, thunder blast damage reduced by 30%. Again, this damage reduction in thunder blast much worse than the buffs over here. So overall, L for Protection Warrior as well. They made some changes to Slayer. I'm not going to go over it because nobody was really playing Slayer. I think people are still going to continue to play um, Colossus for arms and Mountain Thane for fury despite the nerfs. Deep wounds damage has been reduced. Unfortunate. Arms, Dreadnought damage reduced by 50, Cleave damage increased by 20, Blade Storm increased by 20, Model Strike reduced by 20, Execute reduced by 20. So this again is basically a damage redistribution where they're moving some damage out of single target and putting that into AoE. I think that's fair. Arms could use some buffs in AoE damage, but we'll need to find out whether these single target nerfs were overkill or not. Fury further nerfs auto attack damage reduced by 30%. Auto attack is basically the melee damage that you do, right? So that's gonna have a negative impact. Bloodthirst damage increased by 10%. Blade Storm, yeah, I mean, if I look at this one over here, you're not really pressing Blade Storm, so it doesn't do anything. If I go into the talent tree, you basically have Blade Storm as an option between Avatar and Blade Storm, and you were always taking Avatar. So this buff really doesn't do anything for it. And then we've got Raging Blow damage reduced by 20% again. And Raging Blow is this one. Anyways, doing pretty less damage. It's going to do even lesser damage now. So all in all, bad news for Fury. And as we can see next, Protection Warrior gets a damage reduction by 20% to Shield Slam. Execute damage reduced. Ignore Pain damage prevented increased by 5%. So it's a slight buff to survivability. Not that it needed it. Again, Fueled by Violence was buffed. Indomitable increases max health. So they've got some survivability buffs, but the damage has been nerfed. I don't think they were doing any crazy amounts of damage or anything. And I don't think it needed the damage nerfs. What this does is, I think, based on the changes that we've seen today, we've got a potential shift in what's going to be a good tank, a meta tank. We still have VDH doing really well. Protection Warrior is up there. Protection Paladin is up there. But then with the nerfs to Shield of the Righteous, I don't think that it's going to be considered a meta tank unless we see more changes to it. But from a damage perspective, definitely, Prot Paladin still remains as one of the highest damage dealing tanks. And then if you were to look at Brewmaster, really good buffs to Brewmaster. Damage has been buffed, and that's good to hear. Although I do want to note that Keg Smash had been doing more damage than intended on beta, and they've got another Cake Smash buff. I'm not sure if they've also hotfixed the previous bug with Cake Smash, and this is just going to compensate for it. If that is the case, or even if that's not the case, eventually, whenever the bug with Cake Smash does get fixed, it's basically going to bring it back to the same levels of damage. What I'm happy to see though is big damage buffs to Elun's Chosen and Druid of the Claw for Guardian Druid. I think it kind of puts Guardian Druid as a potential meta tank option. Um, the thing is, what's going to decide whether it's meta or not is the position of Resto Druid. The way I see it, there are some possible options forming up here. You can either go for a Brew tank and a Resto Druid, which pair very well with each other because Brew's stagger mechanic basically delays damage as a dot, and Resto Druid has a hot profile, which means that both of them pair really well. At the same time, we've got Prot Paladin, which pairs really well with Discipline Priest, and Discipline Priest does not pair very well with Brewmaster because of the way it takes damage and the way Discipline Priest prefers to do damage in like a bursty style. Uh, and because of how Brew takes damage in a more staggered way, they don't pair very well. That said, it doesn't mean that they can't work with each other, but yeah, it's not an ideal pair up, right? And then we've got Guardian Druid, who again will work really well with Discipline Priest. Um, so yeah, I mean, Mistweaver getting buffed as well. There's a few options on the plate now, but my opinion on what's going to be most likely to happen is that you either have like a Guardian Druid slash Prot Pala with Discipline Priest, or you go for the Brewmaster and Resto Druid pairing. And if you go for the Brewmaster and Resto Druid, that has more chances of going for like a physical comp. So you could potentially see something like uh, Brewmaster, Resto Druid, one of the hunter specs, either survival or marksmanship. You could look at rogues as being a potential option, specifically outlaw rogue, and then your fifth could be either warrior or something like that. Although, yeah, Fury Warrior getting nerfed so badly, I don't know whether that's actually going to happen. Uh, Definitely caster comp seems more likely with the way things are now. VDH is still doing good; it hasn't been touched. So yeah, all in all, I think I would say most of the changes were positive. The only one which I was a bit sad to see was the nerfs to Fury Warrior, and yeah, that's about it. Uh, so that was all the tuning notes for this week. We are now going to jump into ah disconnected me. We're now going to jump into the beta, but before that, I'm going to take a quick break. I'll be right back. All right, we are back and we're going to be playing a bit on beta now just to see how some of the changes feel. So let's see, maybe we start with our Brewmaster. Why not? I think Brewmaster got some decent buffs, so it's worth checking out. Hey, Frosty. Yeah, it must be really early for you in the day. Although it's like what? It is 1 p.m. for me, the middle of the day for me. Perfect. Gotta set up some of this stuff first. Yes. There we go. Much better. And then we want to get brilliant. Ooh, gotta reload. That's much better. And then we got our wait, that work? Yep, it did. Get our Dander's profile. Go. And we're also gonna fine. Then let's get our better cooldown manager profile in here as well. There we go. Should be good to go now. Load. Perfect. All right. Let's find the key. Brew and Blood got big buffs. Absolutely, man. But I think with the Brew thing, it's also a bit of this thing where their Cake Smash was doing more damage than it was supposed to be doing. What I'm trying to figure out is whether they fixed that bug or not. Because if they fix that bug and then increasing 40% for Cake Smash damage, I think it'll turn out to be like a net neutral. So have here. One's over here. Instantly. Yeah, that's good. Also good. Not sure if I want to play with Black Ox Brew though. I think I'll play with this instead. And then we've got, yeah, rest of it looks pretty much fine. And should be good to go. Let me get rid of this. Sorry about that. Brilliant. Oh, and I noticed we also got a new follower on Twitch 3am. Welcome to the stream if you're still around. Sorry I missed it before. Uh, Say hi in chat. All right, let's pick up a key. Skyreach. Ugh, don't know if I want that. Lot of Skyreach, huh? Great RNG. All right, first let's see what groups are going on. All right, let's just list our own key. Maybe we start with have a Windrunner Spire. Maybe we can go Nexus Point. Maybe let's go Nexus Point. Man, going over those beta tuning patch notes, whew, such a long essay, it really dried my throat. Pretty sure a lot of people are going to be testing Balance Druid. I wouldn't mind one in the group. Got a sub rogue. All right, let's see. Disky being a holy priest. Okay. Yeah, let's actually see how Holy Priest is doing after the healing buffs. Nexus. Lothraxion. We are coming for you, Lothraxion. Oh, let me. This.
Ratheoz, give up this foolishness. We have
Okay,
already
looks
won.
like we lost our healer. Just wait.
You put
Give it a
all
couple
of
of minutes.
Silvermoon in danger. This isn't worth the risk. There seem to be a few pieces missing. We have to find them if we're going to stop Ratheoz.
Just find a new healer. Whoopsie daisy. I think Nexus Point Xenos is basically one of the more fun dungeons in my opinion. Mm. Oh yeah, we got a Restored Ruin. Yeah, I think like in terms of if you look at all of the bosses, right? Uh, oops, not this one. Yeah, this is the one with the ley line arrays. I think that's pretty interesting. Going and basically, uh, having those links between the conduits that does like a whole lot of damage. I think that's a pretty interesting thing. Like if you don't know what you're doing, that is something that can definitely wipe you. And essentially, what you're supposed to do over there is somebody who gets marked with that uh, arrow, they need to kind of go and intercept it, as far as I understand, at least. And we have a healer here. Okay. The Lothraxian fight is especially interesting because although it's like really easy to find which is the sort of original Lothraxian to attack it when it does that, almost sort of like a mirror images kind of uh, thing, it's still some a fun activity to do, I feel. Healer has asked us to wait for 60 seconds. I think this is much better. Yay, our healer's back. Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. Not sure how to help you then. I don't know if this will work, but let's give it a shot. Oh no, didn't work. Satch. Well, thanks a lot, Blizzard. Wow. Wow.
Hey, how you doing? Pleasure doing business with ya.
Pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. All right, let's go.
The way forward opens, and your fate entwined.
Lathraxian, give up this foolishness! We have already won! You put all of Silvermoon in danger! This isn't worth the risk! There seem to be a few pieces missing. We have to find them if we're going to stop Lathraxian.
Wee, that was fun. Brewmaster is definitely feeling very tanky. Very, very tanky.
My power is transcendent. Share in it. My power is transcendent. Share in it.
Oh yeah.
What a miserable display! You have all failed in your purpose!
Ooh, shit. Sorry, that was my bad. Should not have turned around that way.
Is there no end to you intruders? Do us all a favor and die before I have to kill you myself! Prove your worth, pathetic lackeys!
Yeah, Brewmaster definitely feels fun to play.
My power is transcendent.
I think the only thing I miss on Brew as compared to something like Broad Paladin is like, the group utility, like being able to bob or Blessing of Sacrifice.
Minions, do not
I mean,
disrespect
that
the enemy!
just is amazing. Like sometimes that's like the main difference between timing a key and not being able to time a key is that if you were able to save your teammates from a death, right? And yeah, I think not having that on like Brewmaster or like even something like Battle Dress, right? Feels a bit I don't know, it makes it feel weird in comparison to Rot Paladin.
Another battle. I am so wounded from the last one. There will be no end to your suffering. Eliminate these intruders or be devoured.
But yeah, Ring of Peace also feels amazing. And I mean, that's the thing, right? Every tank brings something or the other. That was a bad move. I don't know why I pressed Celestial Brew there. Didn't need to, didn't have to. And was it even the right time to do it?
My power.
Curse that damn Nathrezim!
Erika! We definitely need like solid single target damage on some of these bosses. Hmm.
Curse that damn Nathrezim!
I think I had my fortified brew up.
Do not disappoint me again!
I definitely need to figure out like my later stuff.
Don't
Well, we
forget to
got him down.
that will be lost. Just trust us.
You of them all I thought would understand, Ratheoz. Ashamed that the void has corrupted you too.
A gift of power.
I love Brewmaster.
Pilot is showing me a critical failure, Chief Polite.
Hurry up those repairs! If we aren't careful, that will be all of us!
My power is transcendent. Share in it.
Hmm. Something I'm missing here for sure. Where's my team? Okay.
My power is transcendent. Share in it.
Uh, Made a boo boo. I made a boo boo. No, 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 no. Oh, almost died there.
Only the strongest survive. A gift of power.
Aha. Circuits. Yeah.
My power is
Let's go. Hey, 85%. Don't know if that'll be enough though. See.
A good Korite always has his tools. A good Korite always has his tools.
Ooh.
A good Korite always has his food. I expected you to be better. A good Korite always has his food. A good Korite always has his food. My power output is peaking.
A gift of power.
A good Korite always has his food.
Bad place to be in.
A good Korite always has his food. A good Korite always has his food. My power output is peaking. A good Korite always has his food.
My power is transcendent.
My job isn't done. You got the last conduit. Make sure to send them over.
Right? Unfortunately, I don't think we're timing this. Made quite a few boo-boos in there.
You will realize I was right, Valeria. Your judgment has been clouded by the void, as it always does.
My vision has never been clearer, Lothraxian, but I don't want to believe it.
Ah,
The console is working. Starting the bridge now.
oh, dude.
My power is transcendent. Share
Got him. Got him. The tanking for sure requires a lot of focus,
My power is transcendent. Share in it.
especially if you're new to the dungeon. Yeah, I think I gotta work on my positioning for sure a bit. Oh well, at least we finished it.
Farewell, old friend.
Ooh. All right, everyone. I think I'm gonna call it here for today's stream. Uh, I think tanking is like super fun. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna be like a tank main in midnight, but clearly a lot for me to learn in terms of tanking. Fairly new role to me, although I have done a little bit of tanking here and there, but it was like not from a perspective of like pushing really high keys or something like that. I was just like filling in as a tank. So my plan is I'm gonna like finish learning the basics of or some of the stuff around tanking in midnight, learn all of the dungeon routes and stuff, and in the next stream we are going to be doing some more keys as tank, hopefully implementing everything that I've learned. So that should be a lot of fun to do. I think yeah, Brewmaster is good. I would also want to give a shot to Guardian Druid, especially with the changes and all of the buffs. So I'm gonna try that out on stream as well. But yeah, thanks for everyone who joined in. I had a lot of fun, and yeah, I'll see you around. Peace.